Hey guys, it's Angela, and today I'm going to tell you about all the books I read during the months of June and July. So for the month of June, I read 17 books, and for the month of July, I read 17 books. So that's a total of 34 books. My page count is 12,894 pages, and in terms of star ratings, I had 3 books that I didn't rate, 1 2-star book, 7 3-star books, 14 4-star books, and 9 5-star books. Because I'm going to talk about so many books today, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. So let's get into it, starting with the lowest rated and working up to the top. So my first 3 books I'm going to talk about are 3 nonfiction books that I didn't rate, because I don't always rate my nonfiction. Sometimes I just want to read the book and not have to think about a rating. So the first book I have is White Rage, which I read in June for the Blackout Buddy Read. This is a historical account of what whites have done to blacks over the year. It's difficult to read, it will make you so angry, but it's so important. Honestly, I only learned about a small portion of these things in high school, and even then I never learned the depths. So for that reason, I think this book should definitely be read in schools. It's so informative and it was such important history. I listened to it on audio and I would definitely recommend it. Next in June, I also read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. I also read this for the Blackout Buddy Read. And as a white cis woman, I definitely got a lot out of this book and about the discussions of race and just white individuals with their privilege and how we view certain situations. It definitely made me think, and I'm really glad that I read it. It's definitely a book that I do want to own. Actually, all 3 of these books I want to own because I feel like I can go back and reference them. But yeah, this was a really important read and I got a lot out of it. And finally, the 3rd book that I did not rate, I read in July, and that is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Olu. And this is probably my favorite of the 3. And this is an own voices book where Ijeoma talks about her life and instances of racism and raising her children and having a mother who was white. And also she talks about discussing race. And I really liked how this book had like the memoir personal aspect, but then also the discussion of race aspect. I thought it was just really, really good. I loved hearing her story, and she brought up so many great points and really teaches the reader how to discuss race, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Next, we have my 1 2-star book, which is Mayhem by Estelle Laurie, and I saw so much potential in this book. The synopsis had me so excited. It's pitched as a Lost Boys retelling, but like feminist, and it has so many different elements that I like, such as like a speculative magic, and it's set on the coast, and it's set in the 80s, and there's like witchy vibes, a ton of things I like, and so I definitely really hyped myself up to read this book. This book follows a girl named Mayhem and her mother Roxy, who escaped their home in Texas from an abusive situation and then moved to California where Roxy's sister lives. And Mayhem knows nothing of her mother's past, and while she's staying with Roxy's sister, she learns all about their past and their magical lineage and how the water is magic and just a whole bunch of stuff. And I loved seeing Mayhem slowly discover these secrets in her family and realize her own power. However, this book was just trying to do way too much at once. I felt that it was trying to do so much that certain things weren't fleshed out enough and just left me wanting more. There's a whole murder mystery vigilante portion to this book, which is in the synopsis but doesn't show up until like the 40 or 50% mark. So I was just kind of confused on that, and I personally felt if the author had extended it like 50 pages or even 100, she'd be able to flesh out the things that she had developing, and like the characters would be more developed in the end. And yeah, that's why I gave it 2 stars, because I really hyped myself up and it really disappointed me. But the writing was good and this book was by no means bad. In fact, if it sounds interesting, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it, and I'll definitely read more of what this author publishes in the future. Now into my 7 3-star reads. First, starting with The Guest List by Lucy Foley. And this is a story that is set on an island, and it follows a wedding party, and you have all sorts of different perspectives, such as the bride, the groom, the wedding planner, etc. And basically you're sort of solving this mystery. I don't even really know how to describe it without giving anything away. But yeah, overall I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I listened to it on audio, and I really enjoyed the listening experiences with the accent and the different cast members, so I definitely recommend that route if you're interested. Also, I really liked the whole beachy elements since this was a wedding on an island, and because of that, I think right now would be the perfect time to read it. Next, we have The Housekeeper by Natalie Borelli, and this follows 2 women named Megan and Claire, and they have a past that you don't know about, but you know that Claire hates Megan, and she becomes her housekeeper. So the pitch for this book is she's a liar, she's a stalker, and she's in your house. And I think that's all you should know. Overall, I did enjoy this book. I thought it was really fast and fun and intriguing, and some of the plot twists definitely got to me, but I don't think it was anything that was way too memorable for me, and that's why I gave it 3 stars, maybe 3.5. Next we have Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, and I read this with Cindy from the channel Read with Cindy, and this book follows Cornelius Snow and basically how he got to where he is in the Hunger Games. I guess you could say it's his villain origin story, and both Cindy and I were very excited for this, and we both ended up feeling essentially the same. I'm sure that she'll do a better job describing it than I will, but the gist of it is we both were disappointed, and we felt that the whole villain part wasn't developed enough. It just sort of happened. There wasn't like this, I like personally like a slow ascent into like becoming a villain. Like this event happened and cause and effect and cause and effect, and there really wasn't a lot of that in my opinion, and we both agreed that we enjoyed the first half more than the second, and there were just certain things about the book that were anticlimactic, and yeah, it was okay, it was fine, it was a 3-star read. Next we have A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow, and this book follows 2 girls, Effie and Tavia, and Tavia is a siren, and recently a person who she really looks up to, who is also a siren, has been accused of murder, and there's this whole discourse now going on with the murder and sirens in general, and I really liked how Tavia sort of showed the reader how being a black girl is difficult, and then being a siren is difficult, but being a black girl who is also a siren is like the ultimate struggle. I really liked that sort of perspective within the story. There's a lot of discussion about race, which I really did enjoy to see. And yeah, overall I did really enjoy the story, and the reason that I gave it 3 stars and maybe not 4 was for 2 reasons. One of which was the pacing. Personally, I just really struggled with the pacing of this book, and I'd requested it as an e-arc and began reading it in May with the anticipation of finishing it in May because it was released in June. But I was just really struggling with the pacing of this book, and so then I waited until it came out and listened to the audiobook, which personally helped me get through the story more, so I would recommend the audiobook. And the other thing was just the ending. I still really don't understand what happened, and maybe that's just me, and it 100% could be just me, but yeah, the ending just was kind of like, what? So I gave it 3 stars, but I still think that it's a really great book and had a lot of really great discussion. Next we have The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, and this follows a girl named Celine who is living in New Orleans in the late 1800s, and recently around her a bunch of people are being murdered, and they're trying to figure out why. And she also meets this boy named Sebastian who is like dark and brooding, and there's like a romance there. I don't know why I'm struggling to describe this book. Basically, it's about vampires, and a big complaint that I've seen with this book is that there's not enough vampires, because the way the vampires are in this book, it's all like very subtle. Until you get to the last 20%, you don't even see the word vampire. So I get why a lot of people like didn't like it for that reason. And yeah, I still did enjoy it. I enjoyed the murder mystery part and just the setting and stuff. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, but I'm really excited to pick up the sequel now that, the last half, or the last 20% set up for what I hope to be a really good sequel with more vampires. Finally, my last 3-star books are Corrupt and Hideaway by Penelope Douglas. So I feel like I'm going to do an awful job describing these books, so I apologize in advance. I would definitely recommend looking them up on Goodreads because these books do have a plethora of trigger warnings as they are dark romances. But these books follow 4 main characters who are all best friends, and there's sort of a dual timeline with their time in high school, and then they go to jail, and then their time after. So Corrupt follows Michael, and Hideaway follows Kai. I gave them both 3 stars. I think I enjoyed Corrupt more than Hideaway, but I thought that they were both good and fun and dark, and I'm excited to continue with the series. Now into my 14 4-star books. First, we have Small Spaces by Catherine Arden, and this is a middle grade horror novel that I really enjoyed. It was super atmospheric and spooky. It follows this girl named Ollie who finds this book, and in the book is this story of these people who have gone missing, and so she starts to read this book, and then she goes on a school field trip with her class to this farm, and on their way home they get stuck in this mist, and Ollie and her 2 friends basically try to use the book to solve this 100-year-old mystery to get them out of the mist. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I read it in 1 sitting. It was quick, fun, spooky, and atmospheric, and I'm definitely going to pick up the next book. The next 3 4-star books I read were thrillers. First, we have The Wife by Olafar Burke, and this follows a woman named Angela whose husband Jason has been recently accused of sexually assaulting this woman named Carrie. And he is saying that he hasn't done it, and then Carrie goes missing. So in this book, you're following the perspectives of the officer who was originally just investigating the sexual assault case, but now is investigating that and the disappearance of Carrie, and then you're following Angela, who is Jason's wife. And I really liked this book. Of course, obviously there's a huge trigger warning for sexual assault, but I really liked the way that a topic which is really difficult was handled in this book, because you have Angela who's been in this happy marriage for 6 years and everyone loves her husband Jason. He's so respected, and she obviously wants to believe that her husband did not do what he's being accused of doing, and he's still maintaining his innocence. But then you have her son who goes to this private school. They're in New York City, and his friends are finding out what his dad is being accused of, so Angela is trying to sort of protect him from that outcome. And then of course you have Carrie who's missing and her family and wanting justice. And so I really liked the way that how sexual assault is handled sort of in the media, but also how it affects not only the families of the victims, but also the family members of the person who is being accused. So I really like this book. There is way more to it than what I've said in this synopsis, because obviously I don't want to give anything away. But if you feel you can handle the subject matter of sexual assault, I would absolutely pick this book up. The last 20% was wild. This whole book is just wild, and I really enjoyed it and would highly recommend it. Next we have Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, and this follows a woman named Laurel whose daughter Ellie has gone missing years prior. And since then, life hasn't been the same for Laurel. She's divorced her husband, and unfortunately her 2 other children have sort of taken a back burner in Laurel's life, as Laurel's main focus is just she wants to find out what happened to her daughter, as there's been no body or anything discovered. But then you also follow the timeline of Ellie in the hours and days leading up to her disappearance, and overall I really enjoyed this book. Some of the twists I sort of saw coming, but some of them I didn't. Either way, I just really found myself enthralled in this story and really enjoyed it. My last 4-star thriller is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh, and I've heard a bunch about this on BookTube, and I've heard a lot of people rave about it, and I totally understand why. So I'm not going to say much about the synopsis because I feel like you're best going in with the bare minimum. But this book follows a kindergarten boy who was hit by a car in a hit-and-run accident and the investigation that pursues. And that's all I'm going to tell you. So yeah, really enjoyed it and totally get the hype. So the next two 4-star books I have are both by Stephen King, and the first is Firestarter. And this follows a young girl named Charlie who is currently on the run from the government because she has pyrokinesis. Charlie's parents were part of a government experimentation years before she was born, and from that they gained powers, and then when they had her, she gained the ability to start fires with her mind, making her extremely powerful and sought after. I really loved this book, and it's no secret that I love Stranger Things. So when I looked at this book, there were so many things that reminded me of 11 from Stranger Things, and I wrote a whole Goodreads thing on it comparing them. I don't want to talk about it here because one, I have a lot of books to talk about, and two, I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. And the other Stephen King book I read was The Dark Half, and it's thick. And this book follows a writer named Thad Beaumont, and Thad has been writing under the pseudonym George Stark for years, and under that name he's written a lot of extremely successful books, but now he's ready to write just as Thad and sort of put the whole George thing to rest. So he does. And then after that happens, after he writes off George, literally finishes his stories, is all done with him, then things get a little bit crazy when there's a bunch of murders that are occurring, and Thad's fingerprints are there, but he wasn't at the scene of any of these crimes, but a lot of his evidence is. So there's like an investigation going on, and yeah, I really enjoyed it and thought it was a unique idea. My next two 4-star books are The Vampire Academy and Frostbite, both by Rochelle Mead, and as I said, I gave both of these books 4 stars. I'd heard nothing but great things about them, so I was super excited to pick them up, and I wasn't disappointed in the least. These books follow Rose and Lissa, and they're at the Vampire Academy, and Rose is basically trained to protect Lissa from these other bad vampires. And yeah, I really enjoyed the first 2 books in this series, and I'm excited to read the rest. Sticking with the theme of vampires, next we have The Fell of Dark by Caleb Roehrig, which follows this high school boy named Augie, or August. And the only thing Augie hates more than algebra is being surrounded by these vampires that live in his town. And his hatred of algebra and watching him struggle throughout the book with algebra was such a huge mood, and I really appreciated and related to that. Now this ancient force has awoken, and Augie is the only person that can save the whole town from these ancient vampires, and he's basically the chosen one. It has the chosen one trope. But this book is also gay, which I really appreciated, and I really liked the discussion of how Augie feels about coming out, and then you meet another vampire who he becomes friends with, who was born way back when, and he is also gay, and I like his discussion of how it was for him. And this book also features a love triangle, like an actual triangle where like everybody loves each other, not I want him and I can't choose. No, like it's an actual triangle. You know what a triangle is. It's a triangle, and it was so great. I really want to get a hard copy of this book. I absolutely loved it. My next 4-star book is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this book follows a girl named Imani who has a passion for cooking, and she always has, and she dreams to be a chef. And so we follow her during her senior year as she goes to her first culinary class and learns a lot, her relationships with her friends. Also, she has a 2-year-old daughter at home, and she's trying to come to terms with how she's going to continue life after high school with her 2-year-old daughter, as in what she's going to do for a career. And she lives with her grandmother, so there's just a whole bunch going on, and oh my goodness, I absolutely loved this book. I loved the relationship between Imani and her grandmother and her daughter, and I loved all the food aspects and just watching her do something that she just loved so much. It was just really amazing, and I loved this book and would highly recommend it. These next 4-star books were both e-arcs, and the first is She's Faking It by Kristen Rockaway. And this is about a girl named Bree who has dropped out of college and she really feels like she doesn't know what she's doing with her life, which is honestly quite relatable. And so she sort of gets caught up in the world of Instagram and influencers and all of that stuff, while also having a cute side romance. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I liked the whole social media aspect and how, you know, everything you see on the internet isn't necessarily as it seems, and it was just a cute, fun summer read. My next 4-star arc is Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardhoust, and this book is about a princess named Soraya who was born with a poisonous touch, and because of that she spends her time alone at the top of the castle, and then she discovers that the demon in the dungeon has the answers that she seeks. And this was a really great sapphic fantasy. I just really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to get a hard copy. Next we have Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and this book is about a boy named Holden who was recently kicked out of his college because he wasn't getting good grades, and now he's just sort of on the run, going around just trying to figure things out, and he's also on the verge of a mental breakdown and is struggling with depression. And I really enjoyed this book. This was a classic that I had never read in high school, but I'm happy that I read it now. And the final 4-star book I have is Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas, and this is book 3 in the Devil's Night Quartet. And this book follows Damon, who is sort of seen, he is the worst of the 4 boys, and I really liked this. Again, a plethora of trigger warnings follow this book. I would definitely look it up on Goodreads, but yeah, I enjoyed it. So now on to my 9 5-star reads. First, starting with You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This follows a girl named Liz who has recently applied to the college of her dreams, but her financial aid has fallen through. So now she is super bummed because she knows that she won't be able to get into school without that extra money. But luckily, this year at her school, the prom queen prize is money that she could use towards school. So Liz decides that she's just gonna go for it and try to be prom queen, even though she's never felt good enough for her small town. This book includes a sapphic romance, chronic illness, race representation. It was so funny and so cute, and I loved it so much, and honestly, it's probably gonna end up on my top 10 list for the year. Next up, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and this follows a high school senior, Pip, who has decided to make her final project to try to solve a murder case that is very popular within their town. And this case involves Andy Bell and her boyfriend Sal, and it's suspected that Sal murdered Andy and then killed himself. But that's just not sitting right with Pip, and she feels like there's more to the story. So she investigates it. This book was amazing. It was told with mixed media sort of formats. This book was so great and honestly had me guessing right until the very end. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next, Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. And this is a book about a girl named Spencer who dreams to be a pilot. But her father is seen as the coward because he fled during a fight. And because of that, Spencer is deemed the daughter of a coward and will never be able to be a pilot, even though that's all she wants to do. And this book was so amazing. I loved it so much. I've never read anything by Brandon Sanderson before, but now I definitely will read more. The next book I have is Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power, and I really loved this book. A big complaint I had for her other book, Wilder Girls, was the pacing, but I felt the opposite with this book. It was great. This book follows this girl named Margaret who wants to know where her mother came from, and her mother won't tell her any information about her grandparents or anything like that. So then she travels to the town and she meets her grandmother, and once she gets there, she realizes that the roots in their family tree are poisonous and that there's so many dark mysteries surrounding their family, and she just has to stay there to find out. And this book was so good. I loved it so much, and I can't wait to get a hard copy. My next 2 5-star books are The Diviners and Lair of Dreams by Libba Bray. And this was the second time I read The Diviners, but it was the first time that I read Lair of Dreams, and I love them both so much. These books are set in 1920s New York City, and they follow a girl named Evie and her journey solving this mystery, and they're dark, and they deal with the occult, and they're magical, and they're absolutely amazing. If you haven't picked them up, you need to. My last 3 5-star reads are all romance. So first we have Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. I absolutely loved this book. This is the sequel to Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and this book follows her sister, Dani, who is a bisexual witch, and oh my goodness, I loved her so much. And this is her romance with this guy named Zaf, who suffers from anxiety, and I felt that the anxiety in this book was represented really well. And Dani and Zaf basically start fake dating, and then things go from there. It was so good, and I loved it so much. Then we have The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare, and this book is a historical romance following this woman named Emma, who is a dressmaker, and she goes to the Duke's house to come with the wedding dress and claim her payment, only to find out that the wedding has fallen through, and the Duke that she meets is disfigured from a past battle, and so she says to him, well, I need the money for the dress, and he says, well, why don't you just marry me? And that's that. And it's a very hate to love sort of thing, and this was my first ever historical romance, and I really liked it. And the last book I have is Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase. This is my second historical romance, and I gave it 5 stars. This is about a woman named Jessica who is really headstrong, and she meets Dane, who is seen as like a devil sort of figure, and it's a hate to love relationship, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So those were the 34 books that I read during the months of June and July. If you've somehow made it to the end, thank you so much. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.